Good afternoon, good morning to everyone. My name is Annie Burgess. I'm ESIP's lab director, and today I'm here as the tech host for this session. Before we kick the session off, I did want to remind you of a few things. First, the session is being recorded. As you already know, we are using Zoom, and I'd like to highlight that the reactions button at the bottom, if you're using the application version, there is a raise hand feature. So during discussion, I'd encourage you to utilize that. When you aren't speaking, if you could keep yourself muted, that would help us run things smoothly. If there is a discussion section today, if you would like to turn your camera on, that's always welcome. It is by no means necessary. We do enjoy seeing your faces though. Let's see. And lastly, I just wanted to remind everyone that ESIP does have community participation guidelines. ESIP's community participation guidelines, similar to a code of conduct, are meant to provide guidance on expected behaviors and behaviors that will not be tolerated, as well as what to do when unacceptable behaviors occur. If in the unlikely event there is a disruption to the meeting, like a Zoom bomber, please directly message me or our community fellow, Mike, and we will address the situation. And with that, I'll say welcome. It's lovely to see you, and I will pass it over to our session co-chairs.
Well, thanks, Annie. And to answer a question from Ken, yeah, this is a picture of Ken. And at the July meeting, I believe that's what they put on the slides. So any question should direct to Dave.
Yeah,
and
I put Ken there because he's holding up a high bar for us for the ESIP wildfire cluster. So just to let everybody know that if you have the latest version of the iOS, if you take a picture of somebody, you can just look at their picture and hold your thumb or finger on their picture, and it isolates them. And then you can cut and paste that anywhere. So I'll be having some fun with some ESIP folks as the time goes on.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate being the guinea pig there.
Well, thanks, Dave and Ken. And as everyone knows, that this is a really friendly group, so don't be afraid to put in your comments throughout the session. And today we are really excited to kick off the Wi-Fi cluster for the ESIP. And one thing to invite everyone to go into the Google Doc of the session and sign in of your location, pronouns, and whatever you like to share with your with the participants. And also, please make sure we want everyone to contribute to the notes. So if you hear anything or have any thoughts you want to share, please go into the Google Doc as well. So Mike, if you don't mind, can you put the link to the Google Doc? That would be great. So this is our first meeting, and we want to invite everyone to share your thoughts and to help plan the activities for the ESIP Wi-Fi cluster in the next 6 to 12 months. And with that, I want to invite everyone to the Slido. First of all, we want to understand who are in the session today. And if you can go into slido.com using code Wildfire, capital W, and then just put in about what's your first question would be, what aspects of the day-to-day job can be applied to Wi-Fi, sorry, it's not wildlife. It should be wildfire. But the correction we were gonna make, but yes, wildfire, not wildlife. Great, we got some others. If you can just type in the chat what others means to you, that would be great. It is capacity building or other things. If you select others, please feel free to type it in the chat. We got like mostly researchers, and we know like different people have different skills, can contribute to wildfire management, not wildlife management. We also have like data managers. That's the usual suspects of the ESIP meeting. That's not surprising. And software development, that's great. And research seems to be on the lead right now. We'll give it another 30 seconds to let people get into the Slido. So you can either scan the QR code or, oh, thanks, Carla, education. Right.
And those of you who have mobile phones, you can just scan the QR code with your camera, and it'll take you right into the poll.
Thanks, Jessica. Anna, you have, if you can just go to slido.com, Oh, okay. Yes, thanks, Mike. Mike put it in. Okay, great. Let's see if we can get to 15. Okay, this is the first question. I think we are waiting maybe one person because Anna just got the link. I see Jessica said the other is like management of the research opportunities, play the matchmaking. That's also really important, especially between the stakeholders who need to use earth science information and the researchers and providers who are providing those data. All right, let's maybe move on to our next question. So, so this is going to be a two-part question. We'll do it at the beginning of the session and at the end of the session to gauge whether our session has moved you on the scale. So if you can just say, how do you like to engage, imagine yourself engaging with the cluster? The number one would be, I want to stay informed. And then number 5 would be like roll up my sleeves, trying to start working on things together with the cluster. So we are gonna see an average score of 3 right now. And let's see if we can change the average score at the end of the session. Oh, great. We have a lot of people who are already getting ready to start working. That's awesome. Maybe we should skip the last one. We'll give another 30 seconds for this question. And before we jump into our official programs. Awesome. We are at 13 now. Let's see, at least get to 14. That's the same. Oh, 15. Yes, that's improvement. We have like average score of 3.2, and we have a third of people who responded to the survey said want to get active in the cluster, and some people want to stay engaged. That's stay informed. That's totally understandable. We all have different type of membership at different clusters. So first of all, I just want to give a big picture looking at the growing interest in the wildfire across ESIP and ESIP JSON domains. So first of all, Dave and Karen has been leading a disaster lifecycle, spent more than 1.5 years putting efforts on understanding the pre, during, and post-fire and what's the data needs for a different stage of wildfire, like wildfire lifecycle. And there are other clusters within ESIP, like air quality, interested in the smoke impacts on air quality, and clusters like community resilience, agriculture, and climates, and many other clusters that really all have the strong interest in the wildfire. So that sets the stage where Dave started playing around with the idea of starting a wildfire cluster. And there are also from investment from different agencies like NASA Fire Sense, NOAA Fire Weather, and I see Jeb is on the call as well. So NASA, NOAA is also trying to start a fire weather test beds. And USGS has the community data integration with a fire science group there as well. And recently, the Australian Research Data Commons, ARDC, also have the bushfire data challenge. So there is a really growing interest in the wildfire. So this might be a really good opportunity for us to bring everyone together to see how can different groups can work together. And with that, I'm actually turning over to Dave to talk about some of the outcomes from the disaster lifecycle cluster in the past 1.5 years.
Oh, thanks, Douglas. I guess I'll go ahead and share share my slide deck here, and I'll go back down to past where you were, Douglas. There we go. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we got here. It's great, and we're very excited to be launching this wildfire cluster because of the sort of the demand and the interest in wildfires that has grown because we've had so many impactful wildfires around the nation and around the world. So one of the things that we did back in January of 2021, this was at the winter meeting of ESIP, is in the disaster lifecycle cluster. We created this framework to help identify trusted data sets, trusted information that we could think about delivering to communities and to responders and all that sort of stuff. And we had a session on California burning, putting data to work. And we talked with data providers about how they're putting trusted data into their systems, serving them as web services or KML files or CSV files. And then, we're trying to build our understanding of how that data is accessed and used. And then in July of 2021, we talked a lot about the ESIP ecosystem of innovation. And what that is about is leveraging some of the members of the disaster lifecycle cluster and their connection into different communities like NASA, NOAA, USGS, states, DHS, and see how we could take ideas and products and display them in these operational environments to give sort of feedback as to whether or not those products would be effective. And then in January of 2022, which was the winter meeting for ESIP last year, we talked about wildfires in the pre-wildfire stage. What kind of data sets could we identify that are valuable for decision makers in the pre-wildfire area? And then in July of 2022, we were all in person in Pittsburgh. That was during wildfires. What kind of data sets are available and accessed when wildfires are underway and burning? And then this year, the winter meeting tomorrow, we're going to be talking about in the disaster lifecycle cluster post-wildfire data sets. And so all of this interest in wildfires in the disaster lifecycle cluster kind of pointed us to say, maybe we should have a wildfire cluster, and then we can continue with other types of disasters and looking into the disaster lifecycle at this winter meeting and decide where we want to go. So that's tomorrow in that meeting for the disaster lifecycle cluster. We're going to be taking the second half of the meeting and determining what we want to focus on in the disaster lifecycle cluster. So please come and join. And if you're interested in getting involved with that, we really encourage you to, because Karen Moe and I have been the co-chairs of that, and we're both going to be stepping aside as soon as we get a couple of co-chairs for the disaster lifecycle cluster. And we have one person that's interested already, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. So that's what we've been, that's sort of how we got here. Here's a little blow up of that ESIP ecosystem of innovation, where we are, our arms are open to all the ESIP clusters. These are just examples: discovery, community resilience, public-private partnership, ag and climate, drone cluster. What kind of data products, particularly those products that are made available as web services, can we put into the ESIP ecosystem of innovation and then deliver them into these various users? And so we have a lot of good relationships with various users, and a lot of agencies and organizations are looking to get their data out and get it to be used. So this is really an opportunity for us to kind of grab onto this and put it into the wildfire cluster as we mature over the next several months, and see how we might access wildfire data and information there. So this is an example of a GIS data dashboard that we can pull in different data services. We can do population extraction. You see this sort of circle around these advisories here, where then the system goes out to NASA's CDAC, the Socioeconomic Data Applications Center, and pulls out population data for this area. And it does it from 2000 to 2020, and it continually gets updated as more data gets processed and put in there. So this is just an idea for visualizing products that are offered as web services. And then we can put this in front of community members, in front of agencies, in front of organizations like fire chiefs and fire divisions, to see how this data might be useful, and then to turn it around and say, what kind of data do those decision makers need that we can then reach out through the wildfire cluster. So I think it's going to be a really exciting opportunity because we have all sorts of things that are evolving from the wildfire, whether it's pre, during, or post. But these are just some of the articles that have popped up in the last 6 months. Chemicals from wildfires ending up in water supplies. We'll be talking about burn scars and how can we model the runoff of burn scars so we can alert communities, or at least give organizations like the National Weather Service good input for the hydrophobicity levels of the soil. And certainly mud flows and debris flows are a big problem post-wildfire. We just saw that with all the continuous systems just coming in off the Pacific Ocean, some tapping into atmospheric rivers and really condensing that moisture into California and into the mountains. So this is all really very timely. It's something that we can spend several months in the wildfire cluster just talking about and getting input, but we also want to hear from everybody here. What do you think that ESIP can do that's unique, that we can bring to the wildfire space, particularly when it comes to proactive wildfire management? So I'm going to introduce these speakers. Two of them I have on video, and the first one is Everett Hinckley, who's from the Geospatial Program Office at the U.S. Forest Service. Everett was sorry he couldn't make it today, but he has invited me to speak several times in what's called the Tactical Fire Remote Sensing Advisory Committee, TFRSAC, that's co-chaired by U.S. Forest Service, NASA, and now they've added NOAA and USGS to the picture, which is really quite awesome because so many agencies are doing such great work. But what I thought we would do with these presentations is just to give you an idea for what's going on in the wildfire space from these four distinguished speakers. After Everett, we'll have Jessica McCarty. She's online with us here. And then I'm going to show a video of how Fire Chief Dave Winokur from the Moraga-Orinda Fire District in California describes this proactive wildfire management vision and what he needs to make sure he can attack the bad fire and leave the good fire to burn. It's really was brand new as far as I'm concerned, but many in the wildfire space have talked about this for a little bit. And then we'll go to Jessica Block, who is with us as well from UCSD, University of California, San Diego, the Wildfire Lab, where they're doing some phenomenal work on wildfire behavior. They're only about 10 minutes. Fire Chief Dave Winokur's video is only 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my sharing, and I'll bring up Everett Hinckley from the Forest Service as a separate video.
While you're doing that, Dave, I just want to remind every speaker you have 10 minutes. And when you see my face showing up on the screen, that means your 10 minutes is about up. And I have a ring bell that will ring to remind you that your time is up.
That's great. Thanks, Douglas. It's always good to hear that bell so we can continue and move this along. Here's Fire Chief Dave Winokur. Oh, I'm sorry. It should be Everett Hinckley. My bad. I need to do that share one more time and pick Everett Hinckley. Okay, you may need to turn your volumes up a little bit. Everett is a little bit soft-spoken in some of this video, but here we go.
Good afternoon. I'm Everett Hinckley, the National Remote Sensing Program Manager for the USDA Forest Service. Today I'm going to speak to you about geospatial and remote sensing data management and integration for wildfires. Here's an overview of Forest Service use of remote sensing imagery. And there are two broad categories of remote sensing. There's the conventional time sensitive, which is you get it when you're able to. Then there's the operationally time sensitive, where you need it right now. And obviously, operational fire imagery is needed right now. It's time sensitive. The map products are generally preferred over raw imagery or full motion video. It's used for situational awareness assessment and decision support at all levels of the agencies. and there is no silver bullet remote sensing solution. Some of our current remote sensing capabilities within the Forest Service, we have our traditional and national systems. The traditional systems are a mix of tactical and strategic. We have our Forest Service manned aircraft, the NIROPS aircraft up in Boise. We use unmanned aircraft. We have civil satellite systems like Motospheres and Landsat. Commercial satellites are now collecting more imagery per day, and more of it is being used for fire observations. We also have ground towers, which are very effective where we have these tower networks like California. And then we have contract aircraft and state partners. And those are the traditional systems. With the national systems, we have Firehawk for active fire mapping, Hawkeye fire detection and reporting, and FireGuard for near real-time update and rapid update. So when do we need persistent or periodic ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance? Some fires need more than once per day imagery to support tactical and strategic decisions, especially for dynamic, fast-moving fires near communities or infrastructure. To monitor fire progression and when the fire line impinges on trigger points for evacuations and management action points to detect spot fires before they get established. So for persistent ISR, you have one platform for one fire. It's generally available 12 to 18 hours per day. These consist of large unmanned aircraft, manned aircraft, both fixed wing and rotor wing, and generally they have downlink capabilities, which is useful with full motion video. Periodic ISR, you have one platform that's used for multiple fires. Manned aircraft have speed and ability to cover multiple fires, and this is what we do with our NIROPS aircraft in Boise. And they have downlink and upload capabilities for raw imagery and full motion video. The private sector is also expanding capability with unmanned aircraft and manned aircraft. I'm going to talk just briefly about fire risk reduction. This is really a hot topic now as the Forest Service and other land management agencies are looking to reduce fire risk. We're really way behind on our prescriptive burning, so we've come up with a plan to figure out where our high priority areas that need to have prescriptive burning taking place. We're particularly interested in where wildfire and structure risk intersect. So we take our risk map of fire risk and run that against where the structures are, and we come up with a map that shows us where we really need to work on the prescriptive burning. I want to talk a little bit about incident awareness and assessment. This is similar to the Department of Defense definition of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. However, IAA is implemented domestically and provides timely and useful information to all levels of responders and command. IAA has 3 missions: broad area coverage, damage assessment, and situational awareness. So for incident awareness and assessment for wildfire, the current situation, there are challenges in the wildfire community with the implementation of IAA. We do have capabilities and we have gaps in capabilities. So how do we move forward with remote sensing and geospatial, full motion video and imagery, data and information sharing, and machine learning and artificial intelligence? So previously I went over the IAA current capabilities. You can see the list there starting with national infrared operations. We do have fixed camera systems, the networks, the ground system. We also have a number of different software capabilities that help us with the dissemination and sharing of data and imagery. The NIFC organization has 18,510 active accounts, which support a number of different groups to get access to the data that we're providing, but our current system does not support data streams and interoperability. So let's talk a little bit about our current IAA gaps. We lack the capability to detect and monitor pertinent imagery on multiple portions of a single large fire or multiple large fires in proximity within a single operational period. We have issues with standards and data transport. U.S. Forest Service and Department of Interior wildfires are still dependent on analog land mobile radios and commercial cellular that does not penetrate the wildland fire space. There's also issues with budget and organization. The fire community and IT organizations are not aligned to support. We need to recognize data as actionable intelligence and act accordingly. For IAA moving forward, under the Dingle Act, we need to finish our pilot studies, conduct market research, develop a course of action, and recommendations for agency and interagency partners. We need to recognize data as actionable intelligence. And when it comes to artificial intelligence and machine learning, we need to continue to partner with Department of Energy, NASA, DHS, and others to produce needed algorithms for fire detection, fire mapping, and predictive fire behavior models. And for data transport, we need to evaluate a number of different capabilities: LTE, MANET, WAVE, satellite, PTT, FirstNet, and PLI. When it comes to data integration and management for support to wildland fire, our past focus and approach has been deliver specific focused functionality via specialized applications, build it versus buy it, applications and owned data, a lack of coordination between and among federal stakeholders, and a long lead time from research to deployment, or the speed of government, as I like to call it. Looking ahead, we need to deliver capabilities that are not application dependent, pursue COTS where feasible, consumer off the shelf, develop a preference for data cache to own data versus applications, advocate for better coordination of effort among and funding among federal stakeholders. This is a little bit of a complicated slide and a bit of an eye chart, but it shows the role of technology and data in the wildland fire system. And I'll just go quickly around the outside. Aviation coordination in the upper left, satellite monitoring, incident awareness and assessment, data processing and sharing on the edge, integrated data services, data standards, open data, situational awareness tools, and last mile connectivity. Then over on the right, we have the points that everyone benefits from wildland fire technology. New technology leads to a paradigm shift. New wildfire collaboration includes technology, and technology use is a legislative priority. So you can view that on your own. There's a lot of really good information there. This slide really shows graphically where we are with our data storage and access and where we want to go. In the present situation, agencies use static, specific, and inflexible applications. There's multiple data analysts, and then there's multiple data sources. Where we would like to go is agencies need to adopt technical solutions that are efficiently aligned to capabilities, not applications. So you have your partners, firefighters, analysts, and decision makers all using data from the same data lake, and using those different data sets, but everyone having access to that. And I'm going to leave you with this last slide as food for thought. The slide is labeled the Wildland IT Force Field Analysis. I did not make this slide, but it was very informative when I saw it. It lists in the middle there the Wildland Fire IT Nirvana and forces for change and forces against change. And you can see that the weighting of those different factors there, the last mile connectivity, common operating picture, predictive services, early detection, and effective interoperability are the places that we want to go. And you can see that there's a lot of forces for and against those changes. And finally, for my contact information is here. I'm sorry that I can't be there today, but feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that was Everett. And now I would like to introduce Jessica McCarty. And Jessica is with NASA's Wildland Fire Program. Thanks so much, Jessica. Jessica and I had the opportunity to do a webinar yesterday, and we're doing one today. So to figure out what to do tomorrow, I'm going to be lost. So thanks a lot, Jessica, for joining us.
Well, it's tomorrow, Friday.
Tomorrow's Friday.
All right, we should do something fun if we're going to do something. All right. Thank you, Dave, and it's a pleasure to be speaking to you all. And I can see some of my NASA programmatic colleagues are online, so big hello to them. I want to talk to the group, and we're excited about ESIP Fed creating a wildfire cluster because NASA has, in the last year or so, kind of resurrected the applied science program on NASA wildland fires. So let me go into what that looks like. And I am the associate program manager, but we have a large, wonderful team, including our program manager, David Green, Amber Soya at NASA Langley, Anna Prados, who's online at UMBC, and Joanne Hall at University of Maryland, including some wonderful interns. The focus of our program is really to think about how we can use NASA science and technology to use that type of NASA thinking to solve the impossible, to create science for action as it applies to wildland fire management, and learning to thrive with fires. North America is a fire-adapted continent. As a country, we're a fire-adapted ecosystem writ large. So we want to have these successful collective outcomes of thriving with fire. One of the things that we've been doing is working on an actionable fire science information hub. We're working with our partner Esri on that, where we can share and co-develop scalable techniques, technology, data, products, and just knowledge generation in general, so that it can be used in this functional resilience. And the priorities of the program are to really think about which projects, tools, decision support, and of course, communities of practice need to be formed to move us away from reactive management to fire to proactive management and thriving with fire. And that includes things like science and technology showcases. Now, normally when I have to speak about NASA to a group, most people think about the fleet of Earth observation satellites that we have helped design, launch, and maintain in accordance with other great federal agencies like NOAA and USGS. But that includes partners internationally from Europe, from India, and of course from Japan and other countries. But in this program, we really want to seek this end-to-end innovation integration, which is one of the reasons why ESIP Fed is a nice natural home for us to have this cluster. We are really thinking about the whole system from observations to computing and technology, from GIS and visualization to advanced modeling and risk analysis, including some projects, if you're in the plenary this morning, that are trying to use digital twins. As a program within applied sciences, we're one of a portfolio that really focuses on program areas that matter to human communities, human health, and ecosystem health. So a good example of this would be thinking about what kind of new perspective do we need to thrive in the wildland urban interface. You know, we know the WUI is one of the fastest growing land use types in the contiguous US. So how can NASA satellites, data, technology, modeling be merged with other important community level data to quantify defensible space, the impact of invasive species, and of course, vulnerable human and animal populations in the WUI? On the bottom, if we think about in this orange block, this is today, where we're really trying to have tactical focus on catastrophic wildfires, where we're reactive with limited situational awareness. We have endangered landscapes that are stressed in hazardous conditions, including smoke and contaminants. And we want to move to the future, where there's adapted communities and infrastructure, predictive tools, more resilient and healthy landscapes, and of course, safer air and water. And that's one of the things that our program wants to focus on, and we hope that the wildfire cluster would also take as a task. As I mentioned, the AFC Hub is one of the ways that we are starting to do this. So we have some early adopters and envoys, so not just universities, not just NASA centers and NASA scientists, but for-profit and nonprofit partners. And we have a strong focus on that this spring, this winter and spring. So please check back and get in touch with us if you're interested in using this as a way to highlight this kind of adaptive management. Our current portfolio really focuses on this pre-fire, active fire, and post-fire, where we think about human dimensions, fire risk, decision support, fire behavior, and of course, restoration. And then I would be remiss if I didn't let everybody know that, in fact, on Monday, there was a poster presented by my programmatic colleague, Anna Prados, on our NASA Wildland Fire Management Program. It is presentation 27. It's still out there, so feel free to check that out. And with that, I will stop sharing. Thanks all.
Thanks so much, Jessica. That was great. And we'll have lots of time for questions. This is two-way meeting of the wildfire cluster. It's not just a presentation to those of you who have joined us in the room here. So we're going to be talking about this stuff. I just want to get through this next presentation, which is on from Captain Dave Winokur from the Moraga-Orinda Fire District, and then to Jessica Block. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share another video. Hopefully this one will work better. Here we go. So this is input that Captain Dave Winokur gave the Disaster Life Cycle Cluster when we asked him, what do you need from a remote sensing standpoint, and why do you need it?
I do think, however, there's a much more realistic path, which is managed fire. And so we have a fire burning. We don't have the risk and the liability that are established with a fire that we deliberately ignited. I think it's a very different discussion when you say these are the things that have led us to believe it was safe to ignite a fire, and that even with more data, those windows are going to be narrow and continue to get narrower as the problem increases and we move into a hotter, drier future. On the other hand, if we are able to develop decision support tools that rapidly assess the risk of letting the fire burn, and that being risk of destruction of values that we are concerned about, and the benefit of the fire, because not all fires should be managed for beneficial outcomes, because some of them simply, there's nothing there for them to improve. But if we have the ability to bring this data together and then rapidly assess it in the form of a decision support tool that in near real time spits out a recommendation of this fire, either all or in part, should be allowed to burn, or perhaps a hybrid where it should be managed on this side and suppressed on this side, et cetera, I think we can start to move the needle. Moreover, right now, when we list out our wildfire acres lost in a year, we're assuming that every acre within a fire perimeter was negative fire. And that's simply, I think all of us on this call know that that's not the case. The Dixie Fire burned 1 million acres. Some of those acres were destructive to property and houses and homes. We know about that. Some were destructive in the form of high intensity stand replacement fire. But an awful lot of those acres were beneficial low intensity ground fire. And if we were able, through remote sensing, to record both the fire line intensity and the beneficial or negative outcomes of that fire, and that become an item that is tracked, we could rapidly change behavior within the fire service and the fire suppression culture, where we would manage to achieve those goals. And if the incident commanders on their calls and on their 209 reports were having to report how many acres of the fire were beneficial acres, I think we could very quickly, we could bend the curve, and we could, rather than fighting the fire industrial and suppression complex head on, we could co-opt it while taking advantage of the suspension of many of the environmental considerations, the smoke considerations, and the resource constraints that will continue to limit our ability to increase our prescribed fire acres to where we need to maintain equilibrium. So I would offer up for the group as we think about this, the specific data components that I believe are needed are fire line intensity by acre as a fire is burning, an understanding of where those pathways occurred. So it's not just a perimeter, but we're identifying the intensity of the fire within that perimeter, and we're ranking it by view of what is needed to restore those landscapes to balance. And then develop a manner that can all be rapidly compressed, and then insights developed in the form of a decision support tool that a incident commander, or especially the initial response, could use to value the decision to burn, to allow to burn, not to burn. Because in the absence of that information, what we're doing is we're localizing the risk on a single individual, and we're socializing the benefit on a community, some of whom are not going to understand why this is being done. And I'll tell you, from being in that seat, the default is always to put the fire out because that is always defensible. And as long as we're counting on one person to assume all of the risk of attempting to manage a fire and to manage a fire to beneficial outcomes, we're just not going to, we're going to be leaving a lot of good acres on the table that we could otherwise be converting without having to have this seismic shift of culture and approach and so forth that moving to an exclusively managed fire regime would require.
Wow. So that was some really good information there in about less than 5 minutes for what an active fire chief would like to see. So keep that in your mind as we talk here after Jessica Block speaks with us about some of the things that you'd like to see in the wildfire cluster. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jessica Block to the ESIP wildfire cluster, and I think maybe the first time to ESIP. Jessica, if you're with us, hopefully you can share your screen. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you very much. Okay, and how much time do I have, Dave?
About 10 minutes.
Okay.
Douglas has his little bell that will ring if you.
Oh, good. Okay. Put that into presentation mode first. Hold on. Sorry, technical difficulty.
No worries at all.
In the meantime, so if people haven't seen it, there's a ESIP lab call on the wildfire related things. So please share that with your network.
Okay. How's that? Am I in presentation mode?
Yep, it looks great, Jessica.
Okay, great. Really glad to be here. I was a little bit late coordinating with California Office of Emergency Services on some of the work that we're doing that I'm excited to share today. So I've been heading up from the UC San Diego Wildfire Lab, the operational support side of and analysis side of the FIRIS program from the state of California. That's the Fire Integrated Real-Time Intelligence System. And I'd like to, I'll walk through, the process by which we have been doing business for the last few years. Here's an example. There's a fire that begins that might be detected. This is the Bobcat fire as a real life example that began in the Angeles National Forest. When a fire begins, the firefighters get initial ignition locations as reported by 911 calls or potentially Irwin. And typically those calls are coming from people who are either calling from their homes, so they see maybe a smoke plume out on the horizon, or they're on a highway and they're running past. They're driving past a plume, and so by the time the location of that fire is detected, they are far beyond the actual location. So there's been an effort for a while now to understand how to respond, especially in the wildland urban interface, rapidly to emerging incidents, emerging wildfire incidents. And in this case here, for the Bobcat, we have the initial alert location to the east, closer to that reservoir, and then we have a GOES satellite detection much farther west. And within only about 20 minutes, this fire is starting to get out of control. And what we're doing at the FIRIS Fusion Center is doing real-time integration to actually much more closely hone in on where the fire is. So these are the California National Guard or Fire Guard detections, thanks to Everett Hinckley's coordination to make those available. And at the Wildfire Lab, we then once we can rapidly assess an accurate location of that fire, we'll predict where it's going with Farsight, which is a fire predictive model developed out of the Missoula Fire Lab from the Forest Service. And we'll publish that to to the troops on the ground who are actually responding to that fire. This is the extent of the final of the Bobcat fire, but an example of also all of the weather stations that have been installed by PG&E, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric over the last several years that enable this rapid response of fire modeling by using much more accurate on-the-ground weather data. And many think that that means that this problem is solved, but we actually at the Wildfire Lab are focusing a lot on the accuracy and the uncertainty in the models and the data inputs. And it turns out, despite the many hundreds and thousands of weather stations that are in the state of California, thanks to the utility companies, we still can't necessarily get perfectly accurate weather data for these predictive models. So it's been a great honor to be part of this FIRES program, because it's really, I'm actively contributing to and witnessing this transition for rapid data and analysis that is changing the way the fire service is responding to wildland urban interface fires, and rapid collaboration being a heavy need, and the value of ISR, which is now IAA, impact on initial attack, and so basically getting aircraft in the sky to help us collect data and have intelligence in real time as fires are evolving. So that includes aircraft initial attack fire modeling, which before this FIRES program, which became a pilot in 2019, but a little bit before that as well. Those of us at Wildfire and Los Angeles City Fire and Orange County Fire developing the program it had never been done before. So the workflow for that program is, a fire begins, aircraft is launched, that aircraft data goes to a common operating picture, which is hosted by Intera. The Fusion Center is integrating also ground intel from dispatch radio, the Alert California cameras, Alert Wildfire cameras, other situational awareness platforms, aircraft. So we'll do flight following for aircraft to get a better location. We predict where it's going to go, and then the publication goes to interagency organizations and common operating pictures and firefighters on the ground that have now a much more accurate location for the fire and its potential for where it's going to go. And so one thing I do want to share with the group is how this tracking for real-time emerging fire monitoring is working, and we'll be publishing a white paper soon on how that Fusion Center is doing business, integrating all of this amazing technology that's been installed by multiple organizations, and how firefighters are supervising us in the fire modeling to make that happen and deliver best products. And again, the emphasis I like to continue to share is these examples of a fire beginning, there's significant values at risk, neighborhoods. In this incident here, this is the Blue Ridge incident that was in Orange County in 2020. The 911 call is where this pin is. So they had clearly been driving probably from east to west. The satellite hotspot detection is this entire 2-kilometer pixel. And then the firefighter that was responding texted me this lat long. And that significantly influenced where I ran that initial attack model that helped then inform the suppression efforts of that fire. And then on the research side, we have this tremendous opportunity to now vet the advantages and disadvantages of Farsight and other fire predictive models and make improvements over time. So here's the Getty fire in 2019. The aircraft was able to give us 14 subsequent perimeters, and we overlay them here with the initial attack model that we provided. So this was an excellent example of how well Farsight ran for us, and that we were able to nail the location and the inputs for that fire for the model to be accurate. But we can also you know, we can also now do further research on, you know, refining the behavior of fire site, and advancing fire science with that data, potentially informing processes with artificial intelligence or fire behavior physics. This is a really excellent example from the Tick fire that I like to share because it's a great example of how a firefighter knew how to interpret this model on initial attack. We get this perimeter from aircraft. The model we presented shows the fire spotting over the highway, which the battalion chief was skeptical of, but he sent the National Guard over there to monitor for emerging, for embercast and, you know, and new fires. And they were able to suppress all of the new embercasts that spotted over the highway and prevented the fire from continuing to the south. So, so it's been really exciting to see. There's a whole new layer of communication processes that are happening and being refined. Right now, we're using WhatsApp to publish the location and potential for these fires, and then subsequent models if the fire is continuing to run. And then we also make sure that these things are dispersed into things like ATAC and other common operating platforms so people can use the tools that they are familiar with and want to use. The Wildfire Lab is so supporting the fire predictive modeling efforts. We've developed the interface by which the modeling is done and the monitoring is done. We push all that data to Intera, which is also the common operating platform for State of California Scout, the next generation Scout platform. And we'll iterate on that process as needed if fires are proceeding. And so what's coming down the pipe is also additional sensors that are that we've put on the aircraft for FIRUS and are doing some R&D for. This is an actively moving landslide in Humboldt County. That's it's a deep-seated landslide that's been starting to move post all of these atmospheric rivers. So we flew this landslide, and this is the optical imagery product, and on the right here is the synthetic aperture radar product, and you can pick out the landslide fringe a little bit better in the radar. And what we'll be doing is doing subsequent flights to do some interferometric differencing to see if we can track the rate of movement of this landslide. And so there's great potential now to also be doing post-fire landslide risk analysis with repeat modeling from a state-funded platform. So we're heavily involved in flood and landslide response using the radar and the optical imagery from the FIRUS platform, and also supporting the data management and dissemination of the intel. It's been a tremendous experience in watching multiple organizations through the state collaborate, and we're continuing to learn more as we go. I think that's all I have to share at this moment. I'm having trouble with so here's my email address, and I'm eager to continue to participate with the group here in whatever way we can in terms of in particular collaborating with firefighters on what they see are needs for the group, and integrating research, data, and tools to the process, because we've had some tremendous collaborators who have their eyes open and are really eager to use the best that we have to offer them. Thank you very much.
That's great, Jessica. Thanks so much. I want to make sure that we get any questions from any either Jessica from today. If you have any that you want to put in the chat, please put in the chat so we can address those. I have one that I just wanted to kick off, and that is, Jessica Block, how do you see with all of this data being put in to, help the firefighter, how can we use this data to also help others, like people in communities, or, a lot of it's going to real-time decision makers. How can we access it, use it, share it, to also keep others informed that aren't having to work on addressing the wildfire?
Yeah, I mean, that is like the multi-billion-dollar question. So, and there are many different philosophies about that have limited the progress in that space. On one end, there are many citizens who are prepared for the technical information, and then on the other, there is this opportunity for misinterpretation of things like predictive models. So we've seen in the hurricane space, the publication of multiple hurricane models that give us as scientists the sense of uncertainty, of the cone of uncertainty growing over the days, multiple days of that hurricane. But we have days of preparation to think and chew on. And when we're talking about initial attack fire models, which could have, for instance, the wind direction slightly off, and could give you a good sense of the potential of the fire, but maybe representing the wrong neighborhood burning down. There are challenges with sharing that kind of data to the public. So I'm have a data visualization background, and we're trying to think of ways that we can present these kinds of risks on emerging incidents in a constructive way that is easily accessible to broader communities. We've had some great successes just by accident through the Wildfire Lab interface that is publicly available. But there's a lot of differing opinion in the fire service about what and when and how that information should be published. I'm sure many people here also know and agree to that. So I think it's the conversation that should be constantly happening and being discussed, and talking about criteria for when and how that information is shared.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And what I'm looking for is some unique aspect where the ESIP wildfire cluster can get involved that might be able to help move some of that along, or, process something a certain way, or do whatever. Jessica McCarty, I was just wondering, I'm just looking in the chat. I don't see any questions yet. So please, if you have any in the room, please put them into the chat. Jessica McCarty, I was wondering, as you were talking about the hub, the wildfire hub of information that's going to be available, what kind of information do you see, your vision, that's going to be put into that hub that may or may not be? I mean, is it going to come from CAL FIRE? Is it going to, or do we go to CAL FIRE for that data, or is it going to be a unique set of data that's available through the hub?
Yeah, I don't think we see ourselves as a repository or a go through for some of the more official data sets. I mean, I think those are being well used, like by groups like Wildfire and others. And CAL FIRE does a really good job getting, their name and data out there. I think what we're really focused on is thinking about what are new data products, new modeling frameworks that give us new knowledge about how to be proactive in our response and adaptive in our response to fire management. And so, for this group, as we have our brainstorming session coming up, those are things like, where are the vulnerable human populations? Where are the vulnerable, species populations? How does that overlap with defensible space, or areas that are, as the chief of the Moronga district was saying, like, if there's a space where there's a vulnerable, let's just say, bird, and that they nest there, and you still allow it to burn because it's reducing your fire risk, I mean, was that the best decision, right? And so we really wanted to think about using the AFSI Hub as a way to combine multiple diverse data sets that give us a better way to have science-driven management, so that we can adapt and be proactive, to these fire futures that we're going to live in and are living in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see a question in the chat, Jessica, asking if you can talk about data commons, Jessica Block.
Yeah, so the Wildfire Lab has launched through National Science Foundation funding support, the Wildfire Data Commons. It also there's also a model commons and AI gateway. And the goal for the data commons is to make available and queryable all open data for wildfires. The model commons is a portal for making available fire behavior models and also AI machine learning models. And the AI gateway is a space where you can query and leverage and programmatically access open wildfire data and use it to do computing on fire behavior and artificial intelligence development that you would then make subsequently open in these portals. So we're as a cyber infrastructure group, we're trying to enable the advancement of fire research through the access of data and modeling tools, and through that open collaboration, as a community, advance the science forward. So yeah, I probably should have had a slide for that, but I think if you Google Wildfire Commons, you'll find it. It's very heavily in development, right? We're still in the development phase. So we have been talking with folks at NOAA and NASA to provide links or accessibility and awareness to data that's available through the federal organizations, and then potentially also the virus data, and basically anything wildfire data related. We're hoping to provide as access points to the commons.
Thanks, Jessica and Dave. And I think we're now, given the time, we're going to move on into a brainstorming session. So everyone is invited to join that session. I'm going to share my screen one more time, and that to lead us into the brainstorming session. So I promise this will be fun. So all right. So as you can tell, I'm a Harry Potter fan and watch Harry Potter all the time. So this is the Daily Prophet headline of Dark Lord got defeated after the last book. And so now we want everyone to imagine the future together, the wicked problem of wildfire management. And what do you see the headline will look like in 5 years, assuming that the community comes together trying to tackle the wildfire management using the earth science information and related data. So just to get your creative mind thinking. So for example, like the proactive wildfire management landscape forever changed by earth science data. And so I'm giving everyone a minute or two to think, and then and you can now start typing in the chat, and don't send it yet. And once I said send in 2 minutes, I would like to see a waterfall of the different headlines that you may come up with in the chat. And so we can think about it, what we are imagining the wildfire management will look like in the 5 years. Don't try to write paragraphs. So it's just like 10 to 15 words if possible.
Well, it has to be a headline, right? So just a few words.
I feel I need those like calming music to get people's creative thinking going on. All right, 1 more minute. Let's see. Okay, in 30 seconds, I'm gonna say, hit the send, and then let's see what the headline everyone come up with. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see it. Oh, wow. Okay. I made a mistake to ask everyone saying at the same time, but let's just look at it. Data finally did some good. Nice, Jessica. Our sense data helped communities thrive with fire. And can know of wildfire portal saves more lives in 2028 than SARS said.
Oh,
There's
nice
some
one.
competition there.
Nice one.
Eastern states investigating Western big data approach to fire management. ESIP saves life with wildfire prediction and communication in latest Western wildfire. Get data into the hands of K-12 teachers and students for the wildfire. That's awesome, Carla. And shift to culture fire with indigenous leadership. Reshapes fire ecology.
Oh,
That's
nice
awesome,
one.
exactly.
Mhm.
And a new approach to land use planning save lives. Earth science data defeats wildfire forever. Rama, that's a tall order.
That's great though. That's yeah.
Open interpretable data and APIs have changed the wildfire management landscape. Thanks, Annie. I think hopefully maybe some of the ESIP lab can help with that project. Yes, I said I want a waterfall. And so that's great. With all those headlines. So now we're gonna do some mind mapping together to think about using the headline that you just came up with together in mind. And then now I want everyone to go to Slido again, slido.wildfire, use the code wildfire, and go to the Q&A part, not the poll. So go to the Q&A, and then to answer the question or upvote any people's answer that what geospatial tools and data sets and stakeholder capability do you imagine that have been developed in the past 5 years to achieve the headline that you just thought about? Thanks, Mike, who already put the link to the Slido in the chat. So if everyone can go to Slido, give everyone another 2 or 3 minutes. Let's come up with some of the, for example, any data sets, any tools, any APIs, any specific stakeholders. I think some people, like Zachary already mentioned some stakeholders in his headline. So that might be an easy one for him to answer in the question. So yeah, let me switch to Slido to see people should be able to go in, put your answer. I'm gonna go to, we haven't seen any response here yet.
It looks like the question isn't coming up when I bring it up. Douglas, do you have to activate it? I guess you did activate it.
The Q&A doesn't really need to be activated.
Oh, gotcha. Right.
You just need to go to the Q&A tab.
Could you repeat it one more time, Douglas, what you're looking for questions?
Yeah, so the question is here. What geospatial tools, data sets, and stakeholder capabilities do you imagine have been created in the next 5 years? Great, we already have some people answering. Metadata checker for local, regional, state folks to see if their incident will interoperate with all data portals. And we got really specific now, which is great. Or if you can think of any community you want to get engaged, funding and infrastructure to support communities anticipated by wildfire to actively management. Manage fire regime, okay, great. Anyone thinking about new sensors or new communication, integrating predictive fire weather indices with other important variables like soil moisture data. How do we disentangle this complex problem and then choose a few strands to focus on? Thanks. This is basically foreshadowing what we're trying to do next. Real-time cross-platform data sharing and collaboration platform across responders, communities, and schools. I might be able to guess who put that in. Dave?
I don't know what you're talking about.
More data sharing agreements with private companies who collect environmental data that could help wildfire management, like LiDAR. Awesome. Is data even needed? What do communities actually need to thrive with fire? That's a really awesome point. Oftentimes people talk about data in exchange with information, but information might be the things people need to make decisions. Let's give it 1 more minute to put in some of the responses to this question. Semi-automated data fusion pipelines with open interoperable steps for combining real-ish time, multi-source remote sensing, and other data. I see people still, let's give it another 30 seconds. Enable application developers with open interoperable data. Oh, there's also even a risk factor from First Tree Foundation there. Data discoverability tools. Can anyone say more about discoverability tools, like for specific data sets or like across different platforms? For example, find both data from NOAA, NASA, and USGS, or anyone who are interested can feel free to unmute to talk about that a little bit more. Cool. Well, now let's go look at those answers together. So if you feel that there's things that you particularly like, don't upvote yourselves. If you see any answers that you particularly like, please go in to upvote those things so that we're going to migrate into a Jamboards in the next few minutes. I see a lot of discussion on specific data sets, and some on the tools, and some on the user and community side. Let's see, most recent. Okay, give another 30 seconds for people to upvote any specific answers that you really like. Oh, one more answer here. Ways to send data from fire sites. Great, the reverse of the data generation. Okay, now what we will do here is to go through some of the answers and then now start talking about that and move them into this Jamboard. Oops, not this one. So the most upvoted one is real-time cross-platform sharing and collaboration platforms across responders, communities, and schools. And what I guess I'm not guessing anyone who sent this answer in. Can anyone want to elaborate on this specific answer?
Well, Douglas, you guessed. But we've seen that there's a lot of work going into getting data to responders and things like that. But there's also a lot of people in the communities that don't have access to a lot of information. Schools don't have access to information where they could be, briefed ahead of time, where they could be brought into the process of situational awareness. They might not be, ones that are going to jump out and fight the fire, but they are, housing our key intellectual property and students and kids, children that we all love for the future. So trying to figure out how to deliver the necessary information into across all these different sectors, I think is really something that's important.
Great, Dave. And anyone has any other things that you think might be related to what Dave was just talking about? Like, for example, from the answers here, I guess. Cara, do you mind if I invite you to speak out?
Sure. Let me turn my video on, but I don't see myself. Maybe I'm there or not. I don't know.
I can see you. Yep.
Anyway, we've developed some curriculum materials as part of an NSF-funded project that is wonderful. It's created a little model where you can simulate a wildfire. You can change different factors. But I've always said as part of this team that it would be an epic failure if kids can interact with this thing, but they can't actually go to a real data portal and see the information about wildfires happening right there in their area. So part of my work at Turk has been to get data and data tools into the hands of teachers. And, kids and teachers, they're another one of your audience groups, schools especially. So I'm willing to be involved in this cluster, but I'm also putting a pitch out there. This may or may not be appropriate. I know you're trying to think about wildfire management of data at a different level, but if anyone wants to give a talk on either April 22nd or 23rd, we're doing a PD for teachers. And I'm really looking to this group to find someone who might either talk about wildfires in general or wildfire data and data sets tools. So.
Awesome, Cara. So let me say, getting the data and the information to the hands of K-12 teachers, that's something that you think falls on the user category.
That's correct.
Great.
That's great, Carla. Thanks for sharing that info in the chat too. We can learn more about that.
Yep, I'm going to share the link, and it's also in the drive as well. And so everyone, Annie, so if you can help with adding in some of the notes, that would be great. And so maybe let's go to next top voted semi-automated data fusion pipelines. So anyone want to further explain on what this idea is about?
So I added this one, and I'm not particularly wildfire focused. I live on the East Coast, but the idea I had when I was putting this is that with all of our modeling, we run into situations where you have a lot of data products that are very similar to each other. So for instance, even with historical weather data, there's probably half a dozen products that you can get access to for any given area that have similar but disagreeing historical data. And there are people out there who have done things to fuse these data sources into things that you can use in combination, but having machine understandable, like composable pipelines to actually combine these data products that are about the same concepts, but not able to be used directly together immediately. Having some way to automate using these products together, I think would be a huge win for a lot of different areas.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. Do we have any reaction or anything anyone want to add to that? I was just looking at some of the answers. I think some of them might relate to what Mike was just talking about, for example, the metadata, because Mike was talking about those like machine semi-automated, and that which means like metadata and those like checkers need to be really in good place to achieve that. So let's move that item here, part of it. I guess this might be related. So yeah, I think it's always take longer to do the mind mapping, and we have like 8 minutes left. Let's maybe talk about one or two more items. This one, I think it's really complex. We probably need to wait until our next monthly call to discuss which one we want to focus on. But I think right now we are at the idea generation stage. So maybe looking at this data sharing agreements with private companies. Anyone want to speak more about this specific idea?
Hey, Douglas, this is mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just, I only say this because I know that my office mate works for a company that flies LiDAR data for the state of California with and without snow. And I know they've had some data sharing agreements with the state of California just because to reduce duplication efforts of the state flying LiDAR and then private companies. But I know companies like Quansight and other kind of geospatial companies that fly either LiDAR data or look at soil moisture for agricultural companies. Just thinking, and I'm sure, and maybe these agreements are already in place. I know Planet, for example, makes certain data available during fire season, and I'm sure the NASA folks know all about the data agreements they already have. But it would just be interesting to engage the private companies like ASO, the one that that is familiar to us, which is Airborne Snow Observatories. Again, shops like Quansight that just fly a lot of, or are contracted to fly a lot of these data and have them at the table during these conversations in terms of what would be useful for the fire community to have. That's it.
Thanks, Annie. I think that may be related to some of this item of ways to send data from fire sites. I have a guest who put this like answers in, but anyone who want to explain on this specific item?
Oh, it was me. Hi, I'm Martha Apple. I'm here at Montana Tech in Butte, Montana, and I work with high altitude biology, and it's fairly easy to put sensors in the ground and get data, but to send it anywhere and to have access to it during the snowy part of the year, is pretty challenging. And it seems that this applies to fire sites where you can have data collected, but how do you send it and use it so that it's useful during a fire situation or before a fire situation, actually even afterwards. So those are some thoughts I have on that.
Great. Thanks, Martha. And I think I would gonna try to see if Jessica Block can answer any, do you have any data from those like fire sites? Because when in your presentation, you mentioned several of those like data sending in real time.
Yeah, so the easy way to, well, if the ground is snowy and there's difficulty with ground sensors, aircraft is ideal. So the aircraft that we use has direct connectivity at all times. So they'll send streaming video during a live incident. That it can also be made geospatial. They can send video clips that are geospatial as well as still images that are georeferenced, and get parameters and points of interest that are live. we're also doing some research with Department of Homeland Security to do a demonstration using edge sensors, edge computing, to optimize what does get moved over whatever limited bandwidth you have, and testing with satellite communications internet, so that if cellular is not available in a lot of places, like giant chunks of Montana, then
Yes.
that would be the way to do it. And I've been, so the demonstrations that we're going to work on in this 2023 calendar year are going to be a prescribed fire of a location yet to be determined, and then hopefully actually sensing up firefighters in Southern California that are likely to have connectivity, but a satellite communications node will be with them as well, and we'll be, leveraging that for testing. So I think the fire response community is really eager and ready for continuous connectivity to make technology work for them and get that real-time data. And that's the essence of it. There are a lot of vendors now talking about UAVs that can stay in the air for 16 hours and can stream data, and the machine can become part of the node of a mesh network that can make connectivity exist in these remote locations where data can be streamed. So connectivity being the key piece, and then what I heard you say was that the weather and the snow can be a big problem, which I have little experience with in Southern California. So, but yeah. So,
oh, that's really interesting and applicable to a lot of different things, aspects of this fire and just field ecology in remote places. So thank you.
Right.
Cool.
Thanks. Dave, given the time, maybe we should move on to wrap things up. And I see some good conversation in the chat. And with that, we would like to invite everyone to join the cluster meeting, which will be every second Wednesday of the month. And the first one will be March 8th at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And with that, this is our tentative time. So if we figure out that there's a better time in the future, we can definitely switch it after a few meetings in the first a few months. And so we're going to try to continue this conversation, especially try to prioritize and focus on specific things we can do in the next 5 to 6 months. And so we can do some of the progress report out during our July meeting in Vermont, Burlington, Vermont. It would be a nice place to have a meeting. And so if you have any questions, please email Dave or myself. And there's also, thanks to ESIP setting up the Wi-Fi email list. And so you can always join the email list to get updates or stay informed. And we will make sure the slides and the notes from the session will be available. And so let everyone to continue the conversation. Right. Anything you want to add, Dave?
No, just this is terrific. Just, you can join that ESIP wildfire email list, and if we send notes out, we'll send information out. We also have 1 or 2 interns from NASA that are going to be helping to work with us in the wildfire cluster, which is great. Rajuli from UNC Chapel Hill and Janessa from Oregon State University. We're really happy to have them as part of our team as well. And we just look forward on continuing the conversation and evolving this as time goes on, and really appreciate everybody joining this wildfire cluster inaugural meeting for today. So much to talk about, but we really, really appreciate your input. That's going to really help us figure out a good direction here. Douglas?
Before we close, I want to thank Annie and Mike helping out with this session. And without their help, we will be headless, I guess. Like a lot of sharing and other things. Anything you want to add on, Annie and Mike? Any announcements?
No, just thanks to everyone for joining. I would like to plug the coffee hour that's going to be happening, and that Susan spoke to this morning in the plenary, that there is going to be some brainstorming around an NSF call and just time to chat with your peers. So I hope to see many of you there or at future sessions. So thanks so much, and thanks to the organizers for a great session.
And also thanks to our speakers. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, Jessica's, for participating. This is great. I'm going to go over to the coffee break time if anybody wants to chat wildfires.